Hi everybody, Jim Hamilton at Core Resonance. This is the latest video that goes with my latest newsletter. This video is called Allowing Begets Order. And so if you've seen this video before you get to the newsletter, I encourage you to read the newsletter. It's got some great remarks in it. One of the things I want to touch on, and I'm starting to discover, I should say it's starting to surface, is that spirituality, understanding our nature, understanding our connection with God, if you will, is the most efficient thing there is. In other words, all life seeks God. Everything on this planet has a connection with God. What you might say, everything is a subset of God. Now, I like to use the term innate intelligence, source, universal mind, the divine, cosmos, etc. I'm presently on a little spin here. I'm using the term God mostly. Certainly not talking about a traditional understanding of God, or maybe I am, hard to say. But the point is that this connection of which we come and seeking it out and discovering it and rediscovering it and redefining it and recognizing the importance it plays in just our breathing, or our liver staying a liver, our gallbladder remaining a gallbladder. All of this order that we take for granted, understanding it and discovering our place in it is all about efficiency, because as we want to express ourselves, as we want to become more aligned to our capacities and our performance, we need to understand that spirituality and our connection with God is the most efficient thing there is. One of the other things I'll say in that regard as I head off on this tangent that I didn't expect, humanity continues to become more efficient. That's one of the things we can count on. As poorly as it comes across, we're more efficient at killing on the battlefield, but if you look at so many things, like computing power, a long time ago, a while ago, we went from carbureted engines to fuel-injected engines. Efficiency jumped in automobiles quite a bit. Same thing with the old-style tires versus steel-belted tires. Efficiency jumped. We're using mostly AAA batteries and even smaller batteries and new things we buy. We continue to become more efficient. Computing power, and on and on and on and on and on and on. And so as we become more efficient, we will discover that our connection with God, if you will, is the highlight of efficiency. Now let me drift off or head off into the article that I most recently wrote, which will go out tonight. Allowing Begets Order. What I've been kind of postulating or thinking about is how humanity can kind of rise out of this trap of this dysfunction that we spend so much time in. And while I like to say that we can't get there from the mind, my world, Core Resonance, says the mind is dysfunctional from the get-go. And ultimately we have to bypass the mind, and the question is, how do you do that? And that's what Core Resonance is all about, and these discoveries and what we're learning. But at the same time, allowing is how we get out of the morass of where most of us spend much of our lives, or parts or components of our lives. In other words, reactionary posturing is actually bigger than we know. Defensive posturing is bigger than we know. Survival methodologies is bigger than we know. And all of this is the domain of the mind, I might add. And so one of the points I like to make is that reality as we know it as a species is founded in the mind's projecting, and I would tell you that mind, time, and resistance are synonymous. So any reality we're creating that the mind is a component of, you're going to find resistance at its foundation. And so humans, as we go forward, we create reality with resistance as a factor. Now, we could get into that, but that's actually what Core Resonance is all about. So let me just head on to what this article is about, allowing Begets Order. When we go forward in our lives, we often get into environments or scenarios with, let's say, coworkers or our relationships or even the business that we're in, that we have resistance to. And the problem with resistance is resistance begets more resistance. And it actually comes from a concept. What you focus on expands, and as you come to discover that resistance is focus, we begin to get a hint about how we create our realities. And again, with the mind as a factor, resistance is a component of all our reality creating. And luckily, there's a solution to this. It's called allowing. And the first place to begin allowing is where you have resistance, because as we start to use allowing where we once resisted, the dynamic of what once held our realities together begins to shift and change. And so allowing becomes the way out. Now, just for a moment, I'll touch on unconditional love, which is actually beyond the comprehension of the mind and beyond the mind's capacity. Unconditional love, which is a very grand version of allowing, is actually what you have for your maker, for God, for innate intelligence, for source. We are a throughput mechanism by which innate intelligence expresses through us, and unconditional love is no resistance to our maker, such that innate intelligence expresses through us with no distortion, just like innate intelligence already does in nature. That's our highest aspiration, is to have no distortion, or innate intelligence flowing through us with no distortion. And that's actually the highest state of order, and this is what we're after. Ultimately, we have to let go of the mind. So what I'm going to do is give you when I say a formula, we're going to talk about how allowing can take you in that direction, and possibly a very, very, very long way. Ultimately, we have to drop the mind. But so when we have relationships where we have resistance, what we want to learn how to do is take the time to move to recognizing that resistance begets more resistance. And you'll discover that these relationships where resistance is a big factor, that as we change and move to allowing, that dynamic changes. And the very long story short is, as we move to allowing or even loving what we once resisted, the dynamic will break down, because it takes both of us in resistance to hold that dynamic together. Again, whether it be a coworker, personal relationship, not liking your job, whatever it is. And so as we learn how to allow where we once resisted, the dynamic starts to change. And as the dynamic starts to change, what once was solid, what was once very real, in other words, I don't like this person and this person doesn't like me, or I don't like my job. As we start to allow what we once resisted, things start to unfold a bit differently. Now, one of the fun parts of this, as we learn how to allow where we once could not, allowing starts to become easier, because you see, our reality creating is held together by our thoughts, our patterns, our habits, and on and on. And resistance is a major pattern and habit. And as we start to relax that resistance, our realities start to show up a little bit differently. They start to show up with less tension in them, with less discomfort, with less disorder, with less distortion. And what happens is, as we get the hang of allowing and our reality creating start to shift, allowing starts to become a little bit easier. And that's the point of this article. Because as we learn how to allow where we once resisted, order fills in where resistance once reigned, if you will, where it once was predominant. And so as we learn how to relax, as we learn how to allow where we once could not, order starts to show up. Now it shows up initially in small stages. It shows up in small synchronicities. It shows up in small, newfound ease. And as we start to recognize this, we discover that allowing works. Now, I watched the debate last night, the Republican debate last night with Donald Trump and the rest of them. Now, I don't like to use the term horse's ass, but a bunch of these guys, they don't get it. They want to shut Iran down. They want Iran to go back in the Stone Age, just for a single example. I'll tell you a little offside story here real quick. One of the things, I'll put this up in the below this video. But one of the things the Quran says, and it was identified by the leader, and I can't tell you who the leader of Iran is offhand, but one of the things it said was, when peace is offered, you accept peace. See, that's allowing. Now, see, what we have, a massive amount of resistance between these two countries. It's all a bunch of Iran has every right to exist. Everybody has every right to exist. And you see, it's in allowing that things go forward. And I think you'll find this article comes out of Salon.com, out of the Quran, that when peace is offered, in other words, we're in all this, what they're saying, they use examples back in the past, Persia or maybe Iran, that when they were offered peace in a very difficult situation, they took it, and it changed everything. So allowing is a very powerful formula. It's a very powerful concept. And when allowing is allowed, order rushes in, because resistance holds this natural state of order that already exists. It holds it away. It's really as simple as that. Now, humans, we have a mind, we have a choice. Our choices can be as simple as resistance or allowing. I'm going to kind of stop here because I see I'm at 11 and a half minutes. But I'd like you to go read this article, Allowing Begets Order. It touches on another article, All Life Seeks God. This might be the beginning of a series, hard to know. I make this stuff up as I go along. It's a great deal of pleasure. Another time, maybe I'll talk a little bit more about how I write my articles. Please take a look at the article. Namaste. Great to be with you. Thank you.